Hello. Hello, can
Hello.
you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Good, good, good. So good to connect. We're getting some people coming on here. So for everyone joining us, my name is Rachel Gallagher. I am the deputy editor at Gray Magazine. And today we are lucky to have Anne Rachel Schiffmann. She's director and architect based in Snøhetta's New York office. And this is part of our Gray EXPO. Every month we do live Instagram chats with architects and designers from around the globe. And so today, as I said, we are lucky to have Anne Rachel Schiffmann. She leads the studio's interior architecture efforts. Her expertise has anchored a wide range of projects, including the award-winning interior design of Calgary's Central Library, the Student Learning Center at Ryerson University in Toronto, the SF MoMA expansion in San Francisco, among many others. Anne Rachel has been a guest critic at Columbia University's Graduate School of Architecture, Planning and Preservation, Parsons New School, Pratt Institute, Fashion Institute of Technology, and City College of New York, and she has participated in many symposiums, lectures, and panels. So you're very busy. So I'll go ahead and jump right in here. First of all, we'd love to hear kind of how are things going at Snøhetta? It feels like, we're all kind of starting to emerge from the pandemic and, tentatively return to our lives. So what kind of has changed for you, and what are kind of some of the biggest lessons that you feel like you've learned over this past year?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure
Thank you for being
connecting with
here.
you. Well, I guess what we learned really, or crystallized even more so over the last year, is how resilient people are. I mean, this has been immense how everybody globally, approached this challenging time. But we also realized, obviously, that one size doesn't really fit all, or people are re-emerging out of this and realizing, based on their personal circumstances, or whether it's industry related or similar things, it just doesn't, you just cannot apply the one template to all. So I think there's going to be a little bit of a time of readjustment, reevaluating. And flexibility, there's going to be more flexibility. I hope it's going to be bookended by the two extremes. I think,
Right.
in the past we realized that working from home 100% doesn't really work so well. But I think people really just started to appreciate the ones that were privileged enough to actually be able to work from home. They did realize that, certain privacy, certain flexibility, all those things are really helpful. But we also miss being in the office, exchanging and collaborating with our colleagues. So we're really trying to assess a little bit which type of works. When does it make sense, in what phase of a project, to be together and collaborate? So we've been doing very in-depth and nuanced pulse checks every few months with our staff, because we're in the New York office, and with San Francisco, we're over 100 now. Gives us a really good sense of how everybody kind of feels about it.
Right,
And
right.
yeah, and everybody has a very different take on it. So again, that one size doesn't really fit all. The other thing is, I mean, obviously, it seems for us, us designers, architects, creatives, it seems to be that obviously the earlier phases, the ideation phases, the visioning, the learning about the project, the learning about the users, the client, the collaborators, is really the phase you want to be physically closer if you can.
Mm-hmm.
We also, as a firm, we believe in designing with your body. you know,
Mm.
so doing something, you know, sketching, making a model, is just a very helpful tool. And using offices or our studios more as a creative hub, as a workshop, something like that, maybe
Mm.
what's going to happen over the next few months, years, we don't know. Nobody has a crystal ball. But it is interesting. The other day I was on a you know, client presentation, and it was one of the first check-ins we had with a new client. And during the talk, certain ideas and desires, wishes from the client became apparent that were not formalized before. And while I was at that point in the office, and in our office, we always have little things lying around, you know, little whatever, something, little models, little tools,
Okay.
you know, whatever someone likes, they have it there.
Right.
So during the meeting, I was able to just gather a few things that I saw on my desk, on my client's desk, things I've seen, you know, other than last year, I've seen it for years. And
Right. Right.
whenever I
Right.
walk by there, I pick it up and I admire, you know, how someone created this certain shape and form. So it wasn't random. It actually just was part of a thing where the physicality of the object at the moment was able to enforce the idea. So
I
that was
love
really
that.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
And
there's
then,
something about, we were
yeah.
talking, you know, on a Zoom meeting recently, and there's, you know, something about, you know, being in the office. There's these like spontaneous moments that happen. You know, if you're just walking down the hall to get water and you happen to see someone in the kitchen and you have a conversation, and that's, you know, the stuff that we really miss. Those
Yeah.
just kind of moments that you kind of can't create over Zoom or, you know, the phone or working from home as much as, you know, that physical, you know, interaction.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's really interesting, the osmosis and the physicality of it. And I mean, that's really what happens, you know, kind of you throw a bunch of people, creatives with idea into a room and something will happen.
Oh, absolutely. It's magic.
Yeah.
So you're based in Snøhetta's New York offices, and you lead the firm's interior architecture studio. What kind of things do you focus on in the projects, and kind of what is your personal, you know, approach to design?
Yeah, so we have offices in Oslo, in Innsbruck, in Paris, in Hong Kong, in Adelaide.
Oh,
So all
wow.
these, they have their own interior architects focusing on projects, because we believe in context,
Mm.
you know. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, you know, it's sometimes firms have an overarching design approach. We kind of are a bit more specific. So someone that is from the area may just know a little more, but there's these
Right.
moments. So I'm focusing more on the US, Canada, and
Okay.
Mexico. But it's sometimes we do have these overlaps, and it's really exciting because a lot of us have been with the firm for quite some time. So I've been there for 10 years. So it's super interesting.
Oh, wow.
Again, you know, with my colleagues from the Innsbruck office or the Oslo office to collaborate on a project. It's the same thing a little bit, right? They're experts in their field, so that's super exciting. But in
Right.
general, I would say a client is just always so enormously important to a project. It really allows, or it makes it so much easier to go further, you know, whether it's in the design expression, it's sustainability, and just in general, it does, like, a good client makes for a good project. But of course, then community, that's
Mm.
really what we're designing for.
Right.
You know, the users, the community, the context, you know, for example, we've been working on a museum, the Museum for Environmental Sciences in Guadalajara. We've been on
Okay.
that for like almost 10 years. But it's a but it's a good example because that one we had to or we're designing or are mindfully designing about the community, about the people. Most of the users are the kids and their families and schools, but there's other users. There's birds, there's an arboretum, there's
Okay.
also, there used to be a crocodile tank. So we had to think
Oh, wow.
about, yeah, I think it's since then abandoned. But, you know, we had to think about, you know, what is conducive for people to see crocodiles, but really it's not so great for crocodiles to be
Yeah,
in a tank.
exactly.
Things like that. So it's pretty holistic. Then, of course, again, always the context, the social, the environmental context, whether it's in an urban or in a rural context, that's very important.
Hmm.
Cultural aspects, the meaning, the why of the project. We've been fortunate enough to have been involved with a few public libraries. So thinking
Mm.
about what a library, a modern library, the place of a modern library in a city, it's really more like a cultural connector. So
Right,
that's
right.
something very interesting. So we've had the chance to do that in Calgary for the new Central Library, which again, we had an amazing client that really allowed us to go extra far, and
Hmm.
a client that on the outset, you know, was very clear that the library had to be accessible, not just
Mm.
physically, but also emotionally and spiritually accessible to the entire city at large. And the
Wow.
success of that library is immense. I think I read somewhere that almost 70% of all Calgarians have a library card. That is just phenomenal.
That's amazing. Oh, I love to
Yeah.
hear that. I mean, especially just libraries, the way that people, digest information or read books has changed so much in, the past decade. I mean, people are on their devices more. I'm a big, well, you can see in the background, I'm a big
Yeah.
book fan. So I love to, go to a library and just, smell the books
Yeah.
and just spend time there. So I love to hear that, architects, that these are still projects that cities find important and that people are using them.
Yeah.
So that's very positive to hear.
Yeah, it's enormously important. And it was also like during one of the workshops, one of the clients said something that I just thought was so interesting, and we were talking about the security of the books, people
Mm,
leaving with books, and this is Canada, so Canada is a little different than US. In Canada, they often, you know, we were able to end up having no entry control at all, no
wow.
RFIDs, and really that was just because the clients stance was like, okay, so we're in the business of books, amongst other things, amongst building communities and providing a collector.
Right.
Um, but like, what's the worst that can happen? So someone brings a book into the community. That's a great thing. We
Yeah.
want that.
They're just spreading information.
Exactly, exactly. So I just thought that was wonderful.
That
And
is, I love that. That's beautiful. So kind of circling back to the pandemic, and the as we're talking about the way that we use space, obviously the way that we interact with each other and with the space around us has changed, and I don't know that it will ever be the same as it was. Have you kind of felt this trickling into your work, whether it be like requests from clients or your approach now to public spaces?
yeah, I mean, obviously, again, we think about space. It feels like even more than before, or the whole, everything kind of shifted and changed. So
Yeah.
that's interesting. So we're trying to think about right sizing space, you know, where the office is too much again. What happens if not all 100%, you know, 100% of
Right.
people are in the offices? What happens to that? There's a very interesting article that the Harvard Business School
Mm.
brought out about they looked at Australia because Australia has been going back or gone through what we're going through a little sooner than us.
Right, right.
So they've been already trying to figure out some of the metrics, and it's quite interesting um, what some of their findings are. Again, it's what are people liking of being home versus going to the office, and maybe the office is really just kind of giving you the tools you don't have at home, and that really again is a little sector dependent, right? A law firm has a whole
Right.
different set of requirements than an IT firm, than a graphic designer, etc.
Yeah, yeah.
But I mean, it feels for sure like well-being, wellness was a big topic before the pandemic. Now it's even more so because, yeah, it has a direct link to health, well-being, fresh air, all these things, and also because I mean, me personally, it's nice to work from home because I'm in charge of what I eat. I don't have to rely on someone's greasy food that is cooked in the neighborhood.
Right, right.
I'm my best own barista now, apparently. That's a skill I finally was able to perfect. On the other hand, I do want to, I do miss a bit the friction, the exchange a little bit also, That's why we're also in New York. There's
Oh,
dynamicism
yeah.
and,
There's an energy in New York that you don't really
exactly.
find anywhere else.
Yeah, and I missed that a little bit. So I wait a little bit longer. Hopefully more of my colleagues are gonna come back. But I wouldn't want to be just staying back. So I think it's probably, as I said, probably bookended between the two extreme. And
Right.
but on the other hand, even if you look at the larger sense of workspace design, for example, the approaches, the layouts, the principles, they're cyclical. It seems like every 10, 15 years, there's another model. It's either team collaborative or it's kind of benching, everybody's in a row,
Right.
all these different things. So whatever happens will happen for a while, but it'll always change. Everything is always evolving, and again, be resilient. We have to adapt, and we have to react to things that are out of our control.
Right, right, right. No, that's interesting. I think that there's definitely something to be said for finding that balance,
Yeah.
as we all kind of navigate back. So I know that sustainability is really important to Snøhetta. So can you kind of tell me a little bit about, the importance of this in your work and maybe some, practices that you adopt, in your projects?
Yeah, and it's extremely encouraging to see that not only European firms have been since year very adamant about sustainability and carbon reduction, but the US is really it seems like making up for the last 4 years where there was a bit of a pause. So
Yes.
so so this is now very encouraging to see. So a few years ago, we had the chance to work with the Harvard Center for Green Building and Cities to retrofit one of their pre-1940s building on the Harvard campus in Cambridge, and really change it into a ambitious laboratory of sorts. It's a house zero building, so it's net zero, and so a lot of the tools that were developed were at times the first in the US at the time. So it's very interesting. So we've been using some of those, high-level principles. These are often principles we all learned at some point in architecture school, or depending where you're from. I'm from Switzerland, so we had regulations embedded in our studies that were a little bit more advanced than what's happening here now earlier on. But I kind of, then I moved to Canada and then to the US and I forgot. And so it's just, it's good to have this on the forefront. And as I said, again, this was a client-driven project, so it was perfect for us to really get into that. And in the last year, we won a design competition for the Theodore Roosevelt Library in Medora, North Dakota.
Okay.
And it's a rural site. It's informed by the president's personal reflection on landscape. So
interesting.
the environmental design really plays an important role. The landscape design, the shape of the building, and how to build that. So that's super interesting. We also have a small cottage on Lake Muskoka, just outside of Toronto.
Okay.
Where the project started out as a boathouse, and now we just finished the design for the cottage. So similar principles, and again, it's just first principles, really. What kind of materialities you use, how far away, what's the certification on the materials, orientation of buildings, overhangs, all these things we kind of all know, but tend to forget a little bit, be it because the client thinks it may cost too much, which if you're smart about it, you can navigate it a little, or be it because maybe we think it may in some form or shape compromise the design vision. So just having some sort of a checklist, a guideline, a framework where we can just kind of refer back to is just super helpful. And we're on a lot of think tanks with other US firms, industry leaders, manufacturers, clients, real estate developers, and other architects, just to collectively develop toolkits that can be distributed to wider firms. It's just something that's been missing a little bit. So we're hoping to help shape that also a little bit with our colleagues. Yeah.
Well, kind of speaking of sustainability, that's obviously kind of a really big, important thing, that a lot of the design community is looking at. Especially, with the way everything's going with global warming and all of that. So kind of looking to the future, what interests or excites you about the architecture industry today? And what do you kind of hope to see in the future?
Well, what currently excites me is really kind of everything and all. I love architecture. I love, we're builders. We're in a very unique position to shape cities, peoples, contexts. That's an extremely exciting task and a privilege, really. But this is kind of the physical or the analog aspect of it. Then there's obviously, the equally exciting part is probably policy making, shaping how cities and people interact and work in the future. Community building is very interesting to me, and it's very interesting how people that are in the field of policy making are shaping the future. And looking back, everybody always says, and maybe the last 4 years were a bit tough, but everybody says like, oh my God, everything is going so bad. But no, I think ultimately, every progress is a little bit like an avocado. You kind of go forward. Unfortunately, it goes back, and it's really terrible when it goes back for a little moment for all the people it affects. But I do think, hope and believe that everything always becomes a bit better.
Mm,
So, you know, that's in a sense of policy making, in social aspects, and hopefully also the environmental sustainability aspects. I do feel there's still, you know, sometimes it's hard to see, but I do feel there's hopefully always a bit of progress. Yeah, and then there's of course all these interesting things that happen about, you know, I just read this or saw this article, you know, it was in the industry press about 3D printing and whether, you know, that can solve some of the climate crises and housing
mm,
crises and things like that. Then, you know, there's interesting other aspects of 3D printing and using certain materials, organic matters that are researched.
mm-hmm.
But really, I mean, it's just interesting how we all are wanting to grow a strong community and you know, shaping communities and give people
Yeah,
agency. Really,
yeah.
that's kind of what like to me. That's what it is. Um, Giving people a sense of agency through the design the spaces you create.
Mm-hmm. So overall, hopeful outlook for the future.
Yes.
Great, great. Well, to close out, I'd love to hear kind of, you know, a little bit about some of your upcoming or recent projects. You know, mentioned in our email that the recently opened restaurant Burnside in Tokyo, and there's the upcoming observation deck for One Vanderbilt, which is opening in October. So what can you tell us about these projects?
Yeah, so Burnside Tokyo is very exciting. It's a collaboration with our friends, food design art collective Ghetto Gastro. They're
Oh,
from the
yeah,
Bronx. So
very
we've
familiar.
Oh, okay, perfect. They're amazing. So we've been doing, you know, little things here and there, and then they came to us and said like, "Hey, we made connection with a firm N1 Tokyo about a pop-up restaurant culinary space in Tokyo. Are you interested?" And we were like, of course we are.
Absolutely.
Anytime. So that was amazing. So that's a space, a small space, about 1,000 square feet in Shibuya City, just above a family mart. Because of Ghetto Gastro's ties, they were able to give us a good sense, good guidelines, what they want the space to be.
Mm,
You know, it should be a cafe at day where people can come and have cafe food. At night it should turn into a lounge, restaurant, bar with an open kitchen.
okay.
um, so we've been playing a little bit on the Kanibi bodega lexicon. And whenever I talk about the bodega, I have to say Americans know what a bodega is, but I always thought bodega is the wine bar. I mean, you know,
Oh,
it's we're
okay, okay.
talking about the corner store and not the
Yeah,
wine bar
yeah.
bodega. So really, there's like bodega fridges in the space where whomever is going to be the guest chef for the time being can have their goods there. So it's very casual. People can just come there and get their food. But we also had so in terms of the design, we played on the intersection of culture and how you can manifest that. So there's
Okay.
these two big arches that are intersecting the front of house kitchen, dining space with the back of house kitchen. It's all held very dark, other than a little part in the front that is lighter, because during the day you want the cafe to be nice, friendly, light.
Right.
We've been able to work with amazing local architects, co-architects. They've been a pleasure to work with, really, really cool people. And we had Makoto Azuma, the amazing flower artist. So he did
Oh,
an
wow.
installation there. That was pretty amazing. And Kevin Turnbull from OJAS Speakers did some speakers there. So it's
Wow.
just a really nice space. The opening was originally for the Olympics in 2020. So this has been delayed a little bit, but yeah, so they used the space already. So I can't wait to see it in person.
Wonderful.
And
It sounds amazing. And what a great collaboration of creative people.
it's amazing. Yeah, it was really great. Yeah, and it's a treat to work in Japan, to say. I mean, the craftsmanship is
Oh,
just so sublime. It's
yeah,
very
yeah. Wonderful. So then the observation deck.
right, right. So that is a well, it's multiple stories, but the observatory is 4 stories. The whole building is 1,400 square feet, right adjacent to Grand Central. The observatory will open in October.
Okay.
It really is, a sensory urban experience that lifts the visitors through the sky. It's a journey through light, sound, and art. And it starts in a Grand Central Station. So the low slung arches are referenced when you're below ground. And then you emerge through elevator ride. Our collaborators, Kenzo Digital, did an immersive experience. And then once you've been through these floors, you finally culminate your journey on the top floor, which is more a summit bar lounge, has a robust food and beverage component. Danny Meyer is providing food. There's a
Okay.
little area with, solid wood pine benches, almost referencing a little bit a chalet, really being up on the summit, being high up in the sky, giving you that feeling. There's a
Right.
fireplace, but then you can go outside and there's a small terrace. It's small terrace, but it's really amazing. I mean, the views are amazing. You have
Oh,
views across all 5 boroughs and beyond.
wow.
And it has granite pieces there. There's another bar embedded in it. And it's probably the highest outdoor roof bar in New York. And there's a little bit of a green roof, just tiny, tiny. It's probably one of the highest green
Okay.
roofs in the city. But yeah, can't wait to
Oh,
have
it sounds
this.
incredible.
Yeah.
Well, I will have to put that on my list for my next trip. I mean, that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been so lovely to chat with you. I've learned a lot. I'm excited to see these projects that you guys are working on. And I always say, if you're ever in Seattle, let us know.
Perfect. Thank you